The gunshot cracked through the New Mexico dusk like the sky itself had snapped. Clara Reyes dropped to her knees, clutching her carpetbag to her chest, heart hammering against her ribs. Dust billowed around her as the last light of day slipped behind the jagged Chuska Mountains. Somewhere behind her, two close hooves tore across the dry earth, voices shouting, angry and drunk and male. She didn't dare turn around. She didn't have to. She could feel them. 3 days ago, she'd been in El Paso. Her hands had still smelled like lavender soap. She wore a traveling dress her mother once saved months to afford. She carried a letter, signed in careful penmanship, offering her a fresh start as a cook on a cattle ranch in Pine Ridge. Now her hem was torn, her throat raw from dust, and blood someone else's was drying in flecks on her sleeve. The coach had been ambushed not far from the Rio Puerco. Clara had run without thinking, without shoes, without looking back, just ran and kept running until now. "Come on out, sweetheart," a voice called from somewhere in the growing shadows. It slurred around the edges, like it was drunk on power. "Ain't nobody gonna hurt you too bad." The second gunshot was closer. Clara flinched hard, crawling behind a low rise of rocks, arms trembling. Her chest was tight. Like her lungs had shrunk to the size of a walnut. She didn't cry. Not yet. Her mother once told her that tears never helped a woman in trouble, only sharp eyes and faster feet. But tonight, Clara had neither left to spare. The men were circling. She could hear them laughing. She pressed her forehead to the ground and prayed not to be saved, not even to survive, but to not be found like this. Face down, afraid, in the middle of nowhere, with no name, no dignity, and no future. "Wait," someone hissed. There on the ridge, silence followed. Then came the third shot, sharp, deliberate, then another. And shit, he's shooting at us. Clara dared to glance upward. At first she saw nothing, but that burning orange sky turning fast toward violet. Then, like something conjured from myth, she saw him. A lone figure on horseback, silhouetted against the sunset. Long rifle balanced against his shoulder, still as death. Next. "One's for your head," the man called, voice deep and bone calm. "If you don't ride off now, I'll start counting bodies." She didn't know his name, didn't know why he was here, or how he'd found her. But she knew two things with absolute clarity. One, the Devlin gang didn't scatter for much, but they were scattering now. Two, for the first time in hours, she could breathe. Slowly, Clara sat up, fingers still locked around the handle of her carpetbag. Her whole body trembled. Cold air rolled in now that the sun had dipped fully below the ridge. October in the desert was no joke. Hot 1 minute, cruel the next. The rider didn't speak again until the last of the hoofbeats disappeared into the dark. Then he guided his horse down the rocky slope, the animal moving with the kind of ease that spoke of trust between man and beasts, and maybe, once, man and land. He stopped a few yards away from her and didn't dismount. "You hurt?" Clara stared at him. Dust coated her lashes. Her voice cracked when she tried to use it. "No," she managed. I don't think so." "Can you walk?" She nodded. Her knees had other ideas. He didn't sigh. Jess swung down from the saddle, walked over and offered his hand. Large, weathered, calloused. She took it. Once upright, Clara felt the world sway, then settle. "Name's Asher Blackthorne," he said, releasing her hand. "You got one, Clara?" Clara Reyes. Asher gave a curt nod. "You headed somewhere before they found you?" Shh. She reached into her carpetbag and fished out the wrinkled, dust-smeared letter. Her hand shook as she passed it. "To him, I was hired," she said. "Cook's position. Blackthorne Ranch." He read the paper. Blinked once. Then looked at her like someone had just lit a fuse inside his chest. "That your handwriting?" he asked. "No, it came from Leas Redbird. That's the name on the letter." Asher's jaw ticked. "You were hired all." "Right, just not by me." Clara felt the words punch straight through her gut. What does that mean?" He rubbed the back of his neck, staring at the ground like it offended him. "It means someone made a damn fool decision. Without telling me. Leas has a heart bigger than the damn state line." He thinks bringing order to the ranch means dragging in someone from 200 miles east. Clara stared at him. So there's no job? No. Ma. Am there? ESNT. She felt her legs go weak again, this time from something. Worse than exhaustion, the cold slap of hopelessness. Everything she had left was in that bag, $12. 2 changes of clothes, her mother's rosary. No job, no home, no plan B. I'm sorry, Asher added, softer now, but I'm not in the market for a cook. Something bitter rose in her chest. You sure about that? Because it smells like your kitchen hasn't seen soap or bread in about 5 years. Asher raised a brow, not angry, just surprised. I'll work for the meal and the roof, she said. One night, that's it. He watched her a moment longer. Something unreadable passed through his expression.
Ow.
Then he jerked his head toward the trail. Let's go, Clara Reyes. You'll sleep tonight. We'll sort the rest tomorrow. They walked side by side in silence, the moon rising behind them. Her boots were full of dust, her eyes burned, her hands hurt. But she was alive, and behind her, somewhere in the hills, the Devlin gang was nursing bruises and bruised pride. Asher Blackthorne walked like a man with no time for nonsense. Clara followed like a woman with nothing left but forward. Need a cook, he said, low and flat. But maybe I need something else, and I just don't know what the hell it is yet. The main house at Blackthorne Ranch wasn't falling apart, not quite, but it had clearly forgotten what it meant to be lived in. The front porch sagged in one corner. Steps creaked with every movement. One shutter hung crooked. Over a narrow upstairs window, tapping now and then in the cold desert wind. And when Clara followed Asher through the front door, the scent that hit her was some weary mix of dust, dried out wood smoke, old leather, and something faintly metallica-like, rusted tools and forgotten time. He didn't offer a tour. Just pushed the door open, stepped inside, and lit the nearest lantern without speaking. The glow spread slowly, revealing a wide main room with scuffed floors and furniture that looked built by hand and neglected by years. There was a table buried under papers. Saddlebags hung off the back of a chair, boots in a heap by the fireplace. A rifle leaned against the wall by the door within arm's reach. The hearth was cold. I'll get the fire going, Asher muttered, moving to stack kindling like he'd done it 1,000 times with no one watching. There's water in the pump out back. Not much, but clean enough. You'll find a wash basin upstairs. Second door on the left. Clara stood in the middle of the room, carpet bag still clenched in her fist. She took it in slowly, every crack in the plaster, every thick layer of dust on the mantel. It was a house, sure, but it didn't feel like a home. Yet not even close. A dog barked outside. Somewhere behind the house, hooves clopped in rhythm, probably from the bunkhouse or corral she hadn't seen in the dark. Asher's world, she realized, was wide and weathered and very much his own. She was an outsider in all of it. Still, she wasn't leaving. Not yet. I don't suppose you've eaten today, he said, without looking up, feeding a larger log to the newborn flame. No, she replied. It's not since morning, unless you count fear. He glanced back at her. Not quite a smile, but something softened at the edges of his eyes. There's beans. Might even be bread if you don't mind it, hard as fence posts. I can cook, she said, without thinking. I will cook. I'd rather eat something I made myself, anyway. You're a guest, he said, standing. Tonight, anyway. I'm not, Clara snapped, before she could stop herself. I am not a guest. I was misled, stranded, chased, and nearly killed because someone sent me a letter with your name on it. His gaze didn't flinch. Send it, I know, but I'm still here. Asher watched her for a moment that stretched a little too long. Then he nodded once, like he respected her insistence more than he wanted to admit. You can find something in the pantry, he said. If the rats haven't taken it all, I've dealt with worse than rats, she muttered, brushing past him. The kitchen was visible through a wide archway, functional but bleak. Pots crusted with what may have once been food still sat on the stove. A sack of flour sat open, hardened at the top. The sink had dishes piled like a mountain range. Clara rolled up her sleeves and got to work. She boiled water, scrubbed 2 usable pans, dug through what remained of the pantry, and pulled together enough for a simple stew: beans, dried corn, some sort of preserved meat she refused to sniff too closely. The biscuits were inedible, but she warmed them anyway, more for the gesture than the taste. She found a tin of black coffee and put it on the stove. When she turned around, Asher was leaning in the doorway. He didn't speak, just watched. Maybe it was the firelight. Maybe it was exhaustion. But something about the moment felt strange, like a line had shifted, and neither of them had chosen it. "I told you," Clara said quietly. "I'm not here for charity." Asher rubbed his jaw. "You always come out swinging, Clara Reyes?" "Only when I've been cornered." That almost smile again. "You're not cornered anymore." She looked at him squarely. A woman alone, broke, sleeping, in a stranger's house in a county she's never seen before, surrounded by men who've never had a housekeeper. "You don't call that cornered?" "I call it brave." They stared at each other. Then he walked off without another word. Clara exhaled. She didn't realize she'd been holding her breath. The second floor was colder. Wind snuck through the thin seams of the old windows. The room Asher had pointed out had clearly belonged to a young woman once. There were lace curtains, long yellowed, and a vanity with a cracked mirror. The bedspread was faded rose. A brush still sat in the drawer. Clara set her bag down and ran her fingers over the windowsill. Dust clung to her skin. The smell of cedar still lingered faintly in the fabric. This room had been waiting not for her, but for someone. She changed into her nightdress, splashed cold water on her face, and sat on the edge of the bed with a heaviness in her bones that went deeper than fatigue. She had cried, not once. Not even after the gunshots, not even when. The job she built her future on turned out to be a lie. But sitting here alone, clean. With the fire still glowing faintly downstairs, her chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with survival. Asher stood outside the bunkhouse, arms crossed against the cold, hands were mostly asleep. Elias had stayed up late, scribbling something in the ledger by lantern light. "You should have told me," Asher said finally. Elias didn't look up. "I figured if you met her, you'd understand. She came 200 miles. Based on your hope, she's what this house needs. This house doesn't need anything." Elias looked up then, calm, steady. "No, boss. You don't need anything. The house is bleeding." Asher didn't answer, just stared into the dark like it had betrayed him. Clara didn't sleep for hours. Her fingers curled into the blanket. Her thoughts wouldn't stop. The silence here was thick. No trains, no street chatter, no bells or clocks. Just wind, old and dry and endless. When she finally did drift off, it wasn't peaceful. She dreamed of footsteps behind her, letters signed by invisible hands. As a man on a ridge who didn't need saving, but maybe just maybe needed something else. And as the wind tapped at the window and the fire downstairs died too, its last ember, she whispered into the dark, "I won't be another ghost in this house." Clara woke before the sun. The windows still held the night, but the room had changed. She could feel it something quiet, something grounded. Maybe it was the unfamiliar bed, the scent of cedar lingering in the quilt, or the absence of sirens, bells, and city noise. Out here, silence had texture. It breathed with the land. She dressed in the same faded blouse and skirt from the day before, tied her hair back, and stepped downstairs. The hearth was cold now. The house felt suspended in a kind of timeless hush. No footsteps, no voices. Just the faint creak of wood settling around her. The kitchen looked no better in daylight. Worse, actually. A layer of grit coated every surface, and the shelves sagged from years of neglect. The stove was usable, though, and the cast-iron pans, while rusted, could be scrubbed clean. Clara rolled up her sleeves, drew water from the pump-out, back, and started working. By the time Asher came in from the corral, the kitchen smelled like boiling coffee, hot cornbread, and something dangerously close to hope. He stepped through the door and froze, brow lifted. Clara didn't look up from the pan she was scrubbing. "Good morning. You been up long? Long enough?" He nodded once, walked to the stove, and poured himself a cup. Took a sip, stared at it. She glanced over. Too bitter? He shook his head. Best coffee I've had in 2 years. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. She didn't let it stay. Asher ate in silence. Clara watched from the sink as he wiped the rim of his plate with the last bit of cornbread, the way men do when they're used to making food stretch. You sure you're not secretly hiring me? She asked lightly. He leaned back in the chair. You're doing more work than half my hands already. I should be paying you. Her smile faded. I do take pay, but I'll settle for breakfast and a reason not to walk back to El Paso. His face darkened just a little. No one's asking you to walk anywhere. No. Doesn't mean I don't feel like I might have to. Asher stood, emptied his cup into the sink, and set it down gently beside her. No one's kicking you out, Clara, not unless you burn the house down. She looked up, eyed on tea-burn things. Then you're safe here. By mid-morning, Clara had tied a scarf over her mouth and started pulling linens from upstairs rooms. She shook them out in the wind, beat the dust from them with a broken broom handle, and hung them over the porch railing. Floors scrubbed the stairs and opened windows wide enough to breathe again. The ranch hands kept a respectful distance. They passed the porch with uncertain nods, hats tugged low. These men weren't unkind, just unused to a woman's presence. She wasn't what they expected. Elias Redbird found her on her knees in the front hall, scrubbing dried mud from the floorboards. You're doing the work of 5 men, he said, crouching beside her. I've lived in worse places, she replied, wiping sweat from her brow. This one has bones worth saving, he grinned. Asher hasn't had that much faith in it, or in anything, really. He lost someone, Clara said quietly. Didn't he? Elias nodded. Sister, 5 years ago? She died in the back room upstairs. Fever took her fast. Clara paused, hand gripping the brush. That was her room, wasn't it? Yes. She kept it neat. She kept him neat, Elias said. After she passed, he let everything go. The house himself, even the land, for a while. Clara set the brush down gently. You brought me here to fix a house, Elias, but it feels like you want me to fix him? Elias looked at her with kind, knowing eyes. I brought you here to be you, Clara. That's more than enough. That afternoon, Lena Bluebird rode in. She was a storm on horseback, dark braid flying. Behind her, boots dusty, eyes sharp. Clara spotted her from the front steps, where she was airing out a Mothaton quilt. Lena swung down, tossed her reins to a nearby post, and walked straight up the steps. You're the new one? She said flatly. Clara turned. I suppose I am. You staying long? Depends who is asking. I am Lena. My mother's sister raised Asher after his parents died. We re-family. Clara nodded. And I hope I'm not intruding. You're cleaning his house. Making his food. Sleeping under his roof? You don't think that's intruding? Clara folded the quilt carefully, not breaking eye contact. No, I think it's surviving. Lena's jaw tightened. Surviving what? Everything that came before, Clara said, calm but firm, same as anyone else out here. A long pause passed between them. Then Lena's gaze flicked over the porch, the clean railings, the swept boards, the laundry fluttering like white flags. You work fast, she muttered. I don't like living in other people's messes. Another beat. Then Lena stepped back. Don't make a fool of him, she said. Quieter now. He's already carrying more than he shows. I know, Clara replied. Lena nodded once, swung back onto her horse, and was gone in a blur of hoofbeats. By dusk, the house smelled like cinnamon and soap. Laundry hung on, lines between fence posts. The porch had been scrubbed, and the windows wiped clear. The place didn't shine, but it breathed again. Clara sat on the front steps, hands raw, hair frizzed from wind and sweat. She sipped a chipped mug of coffee and watched the last light slip down the hills. Asher sat beside her without asking. He didn't say much, just handed her a biscuit wrapped in cloth. They ate in silence. You've changed the place already, he said after a while. Just swept off the dust, she replied. The bones were always here. He looked at her, then not just glanced, but really looked. I didn't know I missed the sound of a house being alive, he murmured. Clara's breath caught a little, and she smiled, faint but real. That's the trick, she said. You don't know what you miss until it's back. The wind picked up, cooler now. The stars were starting to come out. She stood to go back inside, then paused on the step. Her voice was quiet but steady. Let them talk, Clara muttered, staring into the fire. I'll build something so loud they'll have no choice but to listen. The first frost of the season came early. Thin white veins crept across the window panes by morning, lacing the glass like spiderwebs spun by ghosts. Clara pressed her fingers to the cold surface, exhaled, and watched her breath fog the frost. She had been at Blackthorn Ranch nearly 2 weeks. Each day, she scrubbed more of the house back to life. Each night, the silence seemed less hollow. And though Asher still moved like a man trying not to need anyone, Clara had learned to read the small shifts, the way he left an extra cup by the pot each morning, how he lingered in the kitchen after dinner, even if he said nothing at all. Still, the walls of the house held stories they hadn't told her, and she could feel them, thick in the air, grief layered into the wallpaper, memories sealed into the floorboards. She found it while reorganizing the front study. A box tucked behind a loose board in the desk. Inside, faded letters, a silver hairpin, and a small Bible with a name written inside the cover. Annabelle Blackthorn, the sister. Clara thumbed gently through the pages. Pressed flour had been left between psalms. Dry, paper thin. Forgotten, she didn't read the letters. Not out of fear, out of respect. This grief wasn't hers to carry, but she did sit there a while, her hand resting on the cover, thinking about the girl who used to live in the room upstairs, whose presence still echoed in the way Asher's eyes tightened when someone knocked. Too late at night, or when Lena mentioned her name in passing and then changed the subject, Asher hadn't spoken of Annabelle. Not once, but the house had. That afternoon, Elias brought the mail in from town. 2 bills, a hand-scrawled note from a neighbor about fencing, and 1 letter in a clean, practiced hand. You've got company coming, Elias said, handing it to Clara. She frowned. I don't know anyone who'd write me here. He smiled. Not for you. The name on the envelope read, Father Hector Santiago, arrived. Near sundown, the priest rode a mule instead of a horse, stubborn and broad-backed, with ears too big for its face. His robes were dusty, his face sun-darkened, and his eyes sharp as nails under the brim of his travel hat. Clara greeted him at the gate, surprised at how familiar he felt. It took her a moment to place it. El Paso, she murmured. You're from the mission. Father Santiago smiled. Still am, though the bishop insists I retire soon, but I always liked the wind out here better than the politics back there. He dismounted with a groan, stretched his back, and looked at the house well now. Looks like someone's been working miracles. I've just been cleaning. Clean is a kind of resurrection, he said. Don't let anyone tell you different. Dinner was stew, warm bread, and coffee that made the old priest sigh out loud. I heard you'd come up this way, he told Clara as they ate word travels, especially when a young woman climbs into a world built mostly for men and horses. I didn't mean to stir gossip, oh child, he chuckled. You didn't stir it, you walked into it. That's different. Asher sat across the table, quiet but alert. Clara could tell he didn't trust the man, yet not, because Santiago was a priest, but because he was new. And Asher. Blackthorn didn't do new unless he had to. I knew your mother, the priest said gently, turning to Clara. She once brought tamales to the mission in a rainstorm because she heard we were feeding families out of canned beans. She had a heart that ran ahead of her shoes. Clara swallowed hard. I miss her, of course you do. The meal, they moved to the parlor. The fire was lit and the wind rattled softly outside. Santiago leaned back in an old chair, warming his hands. Asher, he said, I buried your sister. Clara's breath caught. Asher looked into the flames. I know. She asked me to come. Told me to pray over the house. Said I had too many ghosts, and she didn't want to be one of them. I didn't let you in, Asher said flatly. No, Santiago agreed. You didn't tea? A long pause. I don't tea, blame you. Grief isn't something you heal from. It's something you build around. Asher stood and walked to the mantel, his back to them both. She shouldn't have died in that room. She didn't die there. "Son," the priest said quietly. She went home. Asher didn't answer. Santiago turned to Clara. "And you've stirred up something in this place. I can feel it in the walls, in the air. This house is waking." Up again. Clara looked down. "I'm just trying to stay busy." "You're trying to stay alive," Santiago corrected. "And in doing so, you're teaching the rest of us how." Later, after Santiago retired to the bunkhouse, Clara lingered by the fire. Asher stayed standing, arms crossed. "You didn't tell me he was coming," he said. "I didn't know. Elias must have written to him. I didn't ask for a sermon." Clara looked at him. He didn't give you one. Silence again, the kind that was starting to feel less like a wall, more like a pause. Finally, Asher said, "I was 20 when my sister got sick. She didn't tell me until it was too late. Fever hit hard. One day she was walking the fence line. The next she was barely breathing. Clara didn't move. I tried to fix it. I got her medicine, kept her warm, but it didn't matter. She died in the house I was supposed to protect." "Her in? You were just a boy?" Clara whispered. "No, I was the man of the house." He turned to face her. "That's why I don't let people in. Why I didn't want you here. I know you remind me of her. It's not in your voice or your looks, just in your grit." Clara nodded slowly. "We'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one." A cold wind blew outside. The fire cracked. Low, neither of them spoke for a long time. But in the silence, something changed again. It's not a door flung open, but maybe a window, just a little. And as Clara rose to head upstairs, she passed the framed photo on the mantel. Annabelle, smiling faintly, with the same sharpness in her eyes Clara saw each morning in the mirror. She paused. "I don't believe in ghosts," she said. Softly, Asher looked at her. "You don't have to. They believe in us." She didn't sleep easily that night. She dreamed of the letter again. It's the one that brought her here. The strange handwriting. The name at the bottom. And a voice she hadn't heard before whispering, "Not everything lost wants to stay gone." Heart thudding, cold sweat on her neck. Because in the dream, the voice had sounded like Mick Devlin's. Then came the sound of horses. Not one, not two. A whole damn thunderstorm of them headed straight for town. The town of Pine Ridge always looked prettier when you were just passing through. From a distance, it could fool you. Lamplit windows, ribbons hung across storefronts, and the scent of wood smoke and spice floating on the cold air. But up close where the boots hit the dirt and the stairs lasted too long, Pine Ridge could turn cold in a hurry. Especially if you were a woman without a ring or a family name to tether you. Clara stood just outside the livery stable, watching the lanterns sway above Main Street. It was Harvest Festival night, and the whole town had turned out. Fiddles played from the barn-turned dons. Children chased each other around hay bales. Women wore their finest shawls. Men slicked back their hair and tried not to look nervous. She hadn't planned to come. But Elias had knocked on her door that morning with a bundle of fabric, wrapped in butcher paper, and said, "Wear this. We'll stand straighter when you feel like you belong." Now she stood wrapped in that dress-fitted blue cotton, with lace at the cuffs, her hair pinned up in a way that reminded her of her mother. She hadn't worn a dress this fine since, well, maybe ever, and yet all she felt was exposed. Turned to Leverite then, right there when the sound of boots on gravel stopped her. Asher, he wasn't in ranch clothes tonight. His coat was black, his shirt pressed. A silver chain glinted at his vest, and for the first time, Clara noticed he was actually young. Just buried under years of loss and hard weather. "I didn't think you were coming," she said. "I was in tea," he replied.
"Until?"
"I heard you were—" They stood like that a moment, caught between awkward and honest. Then he offered his arm. "Shall we?" She hesitated. Then she took it. The music in the barn rose and fell like a living thing. Fiddles, banjos, the thump of boots on wood. People laughed, clapped, drank cider and whiskey from tin cups, but as Clara and Asher stepped inside, the air shifted. Heads turned, conversations dipped. She could feel them all watching. A woman from nowhere, living at the Blackthorn Ranch, walking in on the arm of a man who hadn't danced since his sister's funeral. Asher didn't flinch. He walked her straight into the center of the room, nodded to the band, and held out his hand. She took it. The music changed. Slowed. They danced. Clara hadn't been held like that in years, firmly, respectfully, with intent. Asher didn't speak. He just moved with quiet focus, guiding her across the floor as if he'd never stopped. "Where'd you learn to dance like this?" she asked breathlessly. "My sister taught me," he said. She said no. Man should be allowed to stomp through life like a mule. Clara laughed. It startled her. He smiled, barely. "I'm glad you came," he said, voice low. "I almost didn't tea." "I know. Why did you?" she asked. He looked her full in the face. "Because you're not just someone passing through," was almost enough to make her forget where they were. Almost until Mick Devlin walked in. The barn went still, like air sucked out of a room. The band fumbled to a stop. Chairs scraped against floorboards. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Mick swaggered in like the devil on a dare-wide hat, scarred face, cocky smile. He was drunk, but not sloppy. It's a kind of drunk that made mean men braver. He saw Asher first, then Clara. "Well," he drawled, "ain't this a sweet picture?" Asher didn't move. "You're not welcome here, Mick." Mick ignored him, strode up to Clara, hat still. "On, funny thing," he said. "Last time I saw you, you were running barefoot through the brush like a scared rabbit." Clara met his eyes. "And you were running like a dog with your tail on fire." Chuckles rippled around the room, but they were nervous. Micah's smile tightened. "Got a smart mouth for a woman who hides behind another man's gun." "I didn't hide," she said, voice steady. "I survived." "You call it surviving?" "Sleeping in some stranger's house, pretending to be somebody's wife." Asher stepped forward. "That ain't enough." "Ack!" Mick turned. "Or what? You'll shoot me again if I have to." A beat of silence. Then Mick laughed. Too loud. Too sharp. He turned to the crowd. "You all see this? The almighty Blackthorn shacked up with a pretty little straggler while his cattle go lame and his ranch turns to dirt. Man's lost his mind." He stepped closer. "Tell me, Asher. She'll warm your bed the way your sister used to warm your bookshelves?" The words dropped like poison in the room. And then Asher hit him. One punch fast and hard square to the jaw. Mick staggered, crashed into a table, took it down with him. Bottles shattered. Someone screamed. Sheriff Calder pushed through the crowd, gun drawn. "Enough." He shouted, "Everyone stand down." Mick sat on the floor, blood in his teeth, grinning. "He hit me," he said. "I want him locked up." The sheriff looked at Asher. "You throw the first punch? He earned it." "That's not a denial." Asher looked at Clara, eyes unreadable. Then he turned and held out his wrists. The sheriff cuffed him. "One night? Cool your head." Asher didn't resist. Clara stood in the stunned silence, fists clenched at her sides. Someone whispered behind her, "That's what happens when you let strays into town." She didn't turn. Didn't move. But inside, something cracked. Not from shame, from fury. She waited outside the jailhouse until nearly dawn. Wrapped in a blanket, Elias brought her. Lena came by once, said nothing, just stood beside her for a long time, then walked away. When Asher finally stepped out, freshly unshackled, bruised but calm, Clara stood up. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yes," he replied. "I did." She stepped closer. "He'll come back. I know. He won't stop next time. I'm not afraid of him." She shook her head. "I'm not talking about you." Asher looked at her, then really looked. "He didn't hit me because I was a woman," Clara said. "He hit me because I reminded him of what he could never own." Asher didn't answer. But the look in his eyes said everything. She wasn't something to be protected. She was someone to stand with. And from now on, they would. Together. "He didn't hit me because I was a woman," Clara said. "He hit me because I reminded him of what he could never own." The wind came screaming down from the ridge that night. It rattled the windows, moaned through the porch beams, and kicked up a dust so fine it slipped in through the smallest cracks of the house. Clara stood in the kitchen, one hand on the wood stove, the other on the table, her whole body tight with waiting. Something was wrong. She'd felt it all afternoon like a splinter under her skin. Asher had ridden into town with Elias, chasing word of stolen cattle. The sun had gone down hours ago, and there was still no sign of either of them. Lena was away visiting family north of the hills. The hands were asleep in the bunkhouse. This house she'd brought back to life with soap, fire, and stubbornness, was quiet again. Too quiet. She checked the rifle. Loaded. She'd been practicing with it since the night Asher taught her to fire at cans behind the shed. Her aim was decent now, steady enough. Still, she hated the weight of it in her hands. Not because she feared the weapon, but because she feared what she might have to become when holding it. Then came the first sound. A soft clink. Metal against metal. Far off. Then another. She moved to the front window, peered through the glass. Nothing but darkness. She didn't bother lighting the lamp. Just crossed the floor slowly and slipped the bolt on the front door. Silence stretched. Then came a voice too close. "Clara," someone drawled. "Sweetheart, you up?" She froze. Mick, of course. He didn't knock. Didn't he need to? Just kept talking, voice oily, smooth. "I tried to be patient. I really did. Let you play house with the broken cowboy. Let you scrub your little floors and pretend you belonged here. But you don't." Her heart pounded. "You don't get to humiliate me and think I'll walk away," he went on. "You don't get to parade around town in a dress and act like you're better than me." Clara stepped back from the door. "You get one chance," Mick said. "Open the door. Come out. Be real sweet about it." He paused. "Or I come in." A pause. Then crack. The front window shattered. Clara dropped, heart racing. Glass sprayed across the floor like diamonds scattered in the dark. Bootsteps followed. Heavy. Slow. He was in tea alone. She crawled toward the hallway, rifle hugged to her chest. Her body moved before her thoughts could catch up. She'd been here before, and not here exactly, but in this place. This space between fight and run, between silence and scream. Only this time she wasn't a girl anymore. She was the last thing standing between Mick Devlin and what he wanted. Clara moved up the stairs, 2 steps at a time, careful not to creak the boards. She reached the second-floor landing and crouched low behind the banister. From there, she could see the broken front window, the outline of 2 men moving through the shadows, flashlights swinging low. "Upstairs," Mick said. "I saw her heading that way." Clara gripped the rifle tighter. Her hands didn't shake. Not yet. She waited until the first figure stepped into the hall. Tall, broad, not Mick. She breathed in, aimed low, and fired. The sound split the house open. The man went down with a yell thigh hit, she thought. Not fatal, but it would slow him. Maybe stop him. "Shit," Mick roared. "She's got a gun." Clara ducked back as a bullet tore through the banister, splinters flying past her cheek. She crawled fast into Annabelle's old room, slammed the door shut behind her, wedged the dresser tight against it. Her breath came fast now, but her mind stayed clear. She knelt by the bed and reloaded the rifle, her fingers automatic. Then she reached into the bedside drawer. The rosary. Her Mother S. She didn't pray. Not exactly. But she held it. Tight. Downstairs, Mick was screaming. "You think he's gonna save you again? That ranch hand. He ain't even here, sweetheart. No one's comin'. This house is gonna burn, and you're gonna come out crying like the rest of him." She heard the crash of furniture below. Boots stomping. Another shot cracked through a wall. And then silence again. Too long? Then the creak of stairs. He was coming. She didn't wait. As the footsteps neared the top, Clara flung the door open, rifle raised. Mick was at the landing. He froze. She didn't The gun fired. Mick dove sideways. The shot missed by inches, blasting a chunk from the wall behind him. He scrambled into the guest room, swearing. Clara backed into the hallway, breath ragged. She had 1 shot left. Then Clara. Asher's voice, sharp, cutting through the dark. Relief hit her like a wave and then vanished. Because Mick heard it too. Of course, Mick sneered from the room. Here comes the hero. And he ran. Not toward the stairs. Toward the back window. Clara shouted, "Asher!" He's heading. Glass exploded. Mick crashed through the second-story window like a wild animal, landing in the dirt below with a howl. She ran to the sill, just in time to see him limp toward the barn, one arm bleeding but still fast. Hoofbeats. Asher and Elias came flying into the yard, rifles drawn. Mick's in the barn. Clara screamed. Asher didn't hesitate. He wheeled the horse and followed. By the time Clara reached the barn, it was over. Mick lay face down in the hay, moaning, blood pooling beneath him. His leg was clearly broken. His gun had been kicked across the floor. Asher stood over him, chest heaving. "You come back here again," he said, voice low and cold, "and I'll bury you myself." Elias tied Mick's hands behind his back. "Sheriff's on his way," he muttered. "He'll want a long word." Clara leaned against the barn door, heart finally slowing. Her whole body shook now, not from fear, but from the aftermath of surviving. Again. Asher crossed to her. "You all right?" She nodded. Then shook her head. "No, but I will be." He looked at her. "You held this place," he said quietly. She looked up at him. "I wasn't going to let him take what we built." Asher's voice was low. "Steady. You didn't just hold the house, Clara. You defended the name on the land." The morning after the firelight and gunshots, Pine Ridge woke quieter than usual. Word traveled faster than wagons out here. By sunrise, everyone knew what had happened. Mick Devlin, bruised and bloodied, lay in the town jail with a busted leg and a charge of attempted murder. And Clara Reyes-Swance, the stray, the outsider, had stood her ground with nothing but grit and a borrowed rifle. But the looks she got that morning weren't the same ones she'd walked into town with weeks ago. They were sharper now. Some nodded with respect. Others turned away, not sure how to make peace with the fact that the woman they'd whispered about had faced down a man like Mick Devlin and lived to talk about it. She didn't need their approval. But she noticed the shift. At the mercantile, the owner's wife offered her a slice of sweetbread without asking for payment. At the smithy, old Josiah tipped his hat instead of spitting. At the churchyard, two mothers crossed the street but didn't pull their children away. Clara didn't smile. She just kept walking, shoulders square, boots dusty, head held high. She returned to Blackthorn Ranch before noon. The porch still had shards of glass in the corners. Bullet holes in the doorway. The living room looked like a battlefield. But the house was still standing. And so was she. Asher was in the barn when she found him, mending the saddle strap with bare hands and silent focus. The tension in his shoulders hadn't left since last night, and when she stepped inside, he didn't look up right away. "I fixed the window," she said, voice light but worn. "Well, boarded it anyway. For now, thank you." She waited. "You were gone early," he added. "I needed to see town. See how bad it looked from the outside." He gave her a sidelong glance. And she shrugged. "Better than I thought. Worse than it should be." He tightened the strap hard. Leather creaked under his grip. "You angry?" "I'm not angry," he said. "The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice." Unsettled. She folded her arms. "Because I didn't wait for you to protect me?" "No," he said sharply, turning to face her. "Because I realized I wanted to protect you more than I ever wanted anything in my life. And I wasn't here to do it." Her breath caught. "Asher, I rode back as fast as I could. And the only thing I could think was, what if I found the house burned, or the bunkhouse empty, or you gone?" "I'm not gone," she said, stepping closer. "I stayed. I fought." "I know," he said. "You did more than fight. You saved this place. You gave it breath again." They stood there a moment, neither willing to break it. He exhaled slowly. "You've done something I didn't think was possible." "What's that?" "You made me want more." Clara's throat tightened. More what? More than surviving, more than guilt, more than watching my sister's shadow on the wall. She reached out and took his hand. It was rough, cracked, calloused, but warm. You don't have to live in that shadow, Asher, she said. She wouldn't want that. I know. I think she'd like what we've built here. I think she'd love it. He squeezed her hand gently. But I'm still not sure what comes next, he admitted. You've done everything I never asked for, and now all I want to do is ask you to stay. Clara stepped even closer. Then ask. He looked down at her, vulnerable for the first time since she'd met him. Stay, he said softly. Not as a guest. Not as a cook. Not even as a favor. Stay because this place needs you. Because I do. Clara's voice didn't tremble when she answered. I wasn't planning on going anywhere. He pulled her into his arms. Not desperate. Not rushed. Just right. That night, she sat alone on the front porch while Asher tended to the last of the livestock. The stars were out, full and sharp. Coyotes howled in the distance. The door creaked open behind her. Elias stepped out, a cup of coffee in each hand. You built something here? He said, handing her one. We built it. He smiled. I just watched. They sat in silence for a while. Then Elias added, There's a storm coming. You can feel it in the ground. I know. You ready for it? Clara took a long sip. I am now. Inside, on the mantel, the old photo of Annabelle remained. But beside it now sat something new, a second frame. Simple wood, holding a fresh photograph. Asher and Clara. Not posing, just smiling. Side by side? I wasn't built to be someone's shadow, Clara whispered. I came here to be seen. Winter came late that year. Dry snow swept in from the hills, thin and quiet, covering the land in a soft hush that made even the horses walk lighter. Clara stood at the fence line, watching the white settle over the fields like a blanket. The earth was sleeping, not dead. She liked that thought. It matched how she felt, like something inside her had finally stopped running. Behind her, the ranch moved as it should. Smoke rose from the chimney. The barn creaked with life. Someone laughed near the well, probably Elias giving some young hand a hard time. The place had rhythm again. Not perfect, but real. Asher came up beside her, silent as always. He leaned on the post, pulled his glove tighter, and said, She would have liked this winter. Clara nodded. She would have stayed up late to see the first flurries. She used to make snow biscuits, he said, smiling slightly. Said if you mixed snow with flour from the first storm, it'd keep you lucky through spring. Then we'd better try it, Clara replied. We could use a little luck. They stood like that a while. Comfortable. Unhurried. Then he turned to her. You sure? She looked at him. I am. Asher exhaled like he'd been holding the question in his chest for years. You want to do it here? I want to do it because it's here, Clara said. Not in spite of it. She wasn't wearing white. The preacher wasn't waiting. There were no ribbons or rice or gathered townsfolk. Just them, standing in a coat of snow, two people rebuilt from ruin. Clara Reyes had arrived in Pine Ridge with nothing but a name, a suitcase, and a letter signed by a ghost. Now, she had a home, a purpose, and someone who saw her not as a burden, not as a stray, but as equal weight beside him. Later, they stood in the living room, warm, clean, lit by fire. Lena had sent a note from her mother's place. Tell her I said don't let him do the dishes alone. Father Santiago had promised to visit again come spring. Said he had a gift for the new household that didn't involve holy water or sermons. Even the townsfolk had begun to soften. Not all, but enough. Change takes time. Claire understood that better than anyone. She stood at the window that night, staring out at the snow-covered porch. The slope of the barn, the bare trees glowing under the moon. Asher came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. What are you thinking? He murmured. She leaned back into him. I was always looking for something that felt solid, she said. Someplace I didn't have to apologize for needing. Somewhere I could stop defending myself just to exist. And now? Now I know it's not the place that makes you safe. It's the people who let you be whole. He kissed the side of her head, soft and sure. Outside, the wind calmed. Inside, the house finally felt like it was breathing. In the kitchen, the wood stove hummed low. On the mantel, 2 photos sat side by side. One of a girl who once kept books neat and letters folded, and one of a woman who walked through fire and built a home where ghosts had once lived. Clara had come west looking for a job. What she found was something no one could offer her, a place she didn't have to earn just to deserve.